Good afternoon. Is it actually working? All right, good. So I have some bad news. Well, I guess good and bad news. I just heard U.S. lost, but they advanced anyway. Yay! So I know absolutely nothing about. I don't even actually care, but just figured I would share that news. So good to see you all. Thank you for having me, Vanessa and Nancy. I have to say, I think one of the best things ever to happen in New York State is when SUNY stole you away. And it's really amazing as we embark on this work together to have the leader of this work, particularly in your seat, leading this work in New York State. So I think all of us in New York are very lucky. And thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your leadership, and thanks for having me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my work in City Hall. And again, I have an interesting title. I think it's a pretty cool title. It's a little hard to explain. Deputy Mayor for Strategic Policy Initiatives, but I think really I'm sort of the Deputy Mayor for Collective Impact. And I say that because my work really involves moving forward large-scale initiatives designed to fundamentally change how we in New York City support the lives of children and families in New York City. And at the center of all that work is a fundamental belief about what government is supposed to deliver for people. Mayor Bill de Blasio ran on a platform called One New York, Rising Together. And it was built on the idea that New York City is experienced in different ways by different people. But although our country is built on an idea of equal opportunity, it's built on the promise that where you begin life should not determine where you end life. That unfortunately here in this country, and certainly here in New York City, that promise is not reflected in reality. That for all of us, where you end up in life is too unfortunately determined by where you began. And Bill de Blasio believes, and Chancellor Farina believes, and everyone in New York City and this administration believes that that does not have to be the case, that we can do better. And fundamentally, that the way that we do better is we really fundamentally rejigger the way that our city delivers services. We all know, I've heard this described, a friend of mine described this very elegantly, that systems are organized vertically, but people live horizontally. And that ultimately our job is to design government, design systems in a way so that we are in the business of serving people based on where they live and who they interact with, not based on the agency or the department or the division or the titles of the bureaucracies in which they're engaged. So I've been in City Hall for about 3.5 months now, and it's been an interesting time, and it's been a busy time, but we really are making progress on some of these large-scale initiatives. And so what I want to do is just sort of talk through with you what some of those initiatives are, and to sort of bring it back to what I think is, for me, the central idea of collective impact, the central idea of the Cradle through College idea, which is to reorganize systems, reorganize services in a way that allow us to have a compelling, clear vision for our destination, but comprehensive strategies for getting children and family there. I think the clicker's not working, so one of my colleagues is helping me. So we have a map here of New York City. Maybe you've seen it. Staten Island, the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, and a borough that I love called Brooklyn. And in all of our work here in New York City, what we're really trying to do is to think about the ways in which different parts of our society work together to move the needle. So of course it starts with the public sector. I work in government now, so we begin with the public sector, and we begin with organizing the public sector to work in a different way. But we also recognize that children don't only interact with government offices. So in all of our work, we begin in the first instance by also engaging the private sector, understood broadly, community-based institutions, hospitals, businesses, and of course, engaging with the community institutions where people live. And so all of our work, we're thinking about how do we bring these people together and all these big initiatives, not after the fact, but in the beginning, to really plan out how this work goes together. So one of the first initiatives that we're working on, that I'm helping to lead, is something called pre-kindergarten. So one thing about my boss, Mayor de Blasio, that he did not think small. So you mentioned Jim Collins. He only thinks in big, hairy, audacious goals. So Bill de Blasio had the idea that every child in New York City who wanted it would have access to free, full-day, high-quality pre-kindergarten. And so the idea that we would go from 20,000 children who have full-day pre-kindergarten today, this coming September, we will have 50,000 children in full-day pre-kindergarten. And the September after that, we would have 70,000 children or more in pre-K kindergarten. And I get scared because I think it's my job to sort of make sure this happens. So I try not to dwell on those numbers too much. So as you may have heard, we had a little bit of a victory in Albany, where we were able to secure $300 million a year to put that system in place. And it's only now that I can say that that actually turned out to be the easy part of this task. I would not have said that when we were fighting for that $300 million. But I really think the work around pre-kindergarten is itself sort of a microcosm about how collective impact should ultimately work. First and foremost, because there are about 14 different city agencies that have to work together in order to pull something like this off, and to pull it off basically in 6 months. January from the time the mayor started to September when we start, but I'll start from March when I started in my role. So the first part of the work is organizing all of these city agencies, from the Department of Education and the Administration for Children's Services, and I see some of my colleagues from DOE here, to the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, which helps license and inspect agencies, the Fire Department, which makes sure that facilities are not tinder boxes, the Department of Buildings, all these agencies that don't normally have a history of working together. So the first part of this is, again, to articulate a clear and coherent goal, and then to organize all of these agencies in a different way to make sure that nothing stands in the way of that goal. And then we look beyond the city government proper to institutions like CUNY and other parts of the infrastructure of New York City, the public infrastructure, which also play a role. CUNY, which is helping to train 400 teachers this fall to make sure that we're moving our workforce to certification. Philanthropy. But also, of course, community institutions, because here in New York, most of the seats that we create are going to be created not in public schools, but going to be created in community institutions, like the Children's Aid Society. I see my colleague Abe, my former colleague Abe from Children's Aid Society. Large institutions and small, which are delivering pre-kindergarten services. So much of this work has been about articulating a big goal and then trying to organize the public sector, the private sector, around this compelling vision for bringing pre-kindergarten to all children, not just pre-kindergarten, but high-quality pre-kindergarten. The other part that, of course, resonates is the idea that ultimately the success of this initiative is based not just on achieving the outputs of getting kids in seats, although that's a good place to start, but ultimately we have to understand that once those children are in these seats, that those children are receiving the type of quality services that we need them to serve. And ultimately, our success will be measured by, are these children ready for kindergarten when they start kindergarten? Are they accessing social services? Are they learning, developing language skills? When we look ahead, is our cohort of third graders performing better on standardized tests because of their experience in this program. So it's about coordination services, it's about having clear outcomes, and it's about accountability. Another initiative that we're working on is middle schoolers, because guaranteeing pre-kindergarten to every 4-year-old was not enough. It might be enough for some mayors, not enough for our mayor. He also wanted to promise every parent of a middle school student that every middle school student in New York City who wanted a free after-school program would have one. We know, I don't have to lecture to this audience, the importance of middle school and the critical role that enrichment programs during the school year and during the summer can play on helping middle school students stay connected to school, embrace their love of learning, and achieve. So again, the same vision. Big, lofty, ambitious goal. Adding 40,000 children to after-school programs this fall. Another 10,000 the next fall, so that 107,000 middle school students will be served by this system, up from about 50,000 now. Ambitious goal. Many agencies involved, the Department of Education, which houses most of the programs, but also NYCHA and other organizations, which also house programs. The Department of Youth and Community Development, which contract with agencies, the Department of Health, City Hall, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it's collective impact, right? How do you bring together all these different parts of city government around a common goal? But again, of course, it doesn't stop with public institutions, because ultimately, all of these after-school programs involve a private provider, a nonprofit, a museum, some institution, partnering with the public school to deliver high-quality programs. And so again, the way that we do this is not by sitting in City Hall and designing a project. It was by bringing together the field, bringing together providers, bringing together principals, bringing together schools, and saying, what would a quality after-school program look like, and designing a system around that. And then in very short order, organizing city government to deliver on this promise. So when the City's OST initiative was created 10 years ago, current NYC Commissioner Bill Chang said that he talked about how it took 21 months from the time this program was designed to the time RFPs were awarded. And this year we did that in 4 months. We created this capacity of 40,000 additional seats, 271 new programs, contracted in 4.5 months, doubling the size of our summer program from 17,000 kids to 34,000 kids. Again, done by having a mayor who establishes a clear goal, and then corralling every part of the city, government, private sector, arts institutions, museums, hospitals, etc., to deliver on this promise. And we think through services like this, we can have a transformative effect, not only on education, but on the lives of children and families in the city. Once parents understand that the city is really a partner in how you live your life, we believe this is only the first step of transforming the relationship between the public and the public. Another big initiative is community schools, which really gets to the heart of collective impact. Because again, some mayors would say, we've got the after school, we've got the pre-kindergarten, and we're good. But no. Let's go back and talk to him. He's it's the reason why I'm not sleeping enough. Another promise of the mayor is that he wanted to create 100 community schools by the end of his first term. And I have to say that for me, this is one of the real reasons why I wanted to come and take this job. I spent the last 5 years working at the Children's Aid Society, where building community schools is essential to our mission. And for those who don't know what a community school is, although I can imagine that's true in this room, a community school is a school that has as part of its fundamental mission coordinating community resources to address all the reasons, all the barriers that can stand in the way of children being able to learn, so that children can come into school ready to do the job of learning, and teachers can come into the school ready to do the job of teaching. So we know that community schools are really at the center of a community impact strategy, because ultimately I think a collective impact strategy is one where community schools, all of which have a strategy for addressing young people's needs, are working together to leverage the resources of that community in schools, where after all, where children are coming and where families are coming to receive services. So our real vision is that community schools can serve as the hub of collective impact strategies in neighborhoods around New York City. And so again, like everything else that we've talked about, this is from the first instance an initiative that doesn't live only in the Department of Education, although that's where, of course, it's centered, but again, brings together the health department, all the institutions of New York City, all the providers in New York City, and our strategy is the same, to bring these folks together, to establish a large goal, a big goal, and to figure out how we work together to, again, fundamentally transform the nature of public schools here in New York City. Our partners run the range from unions to after-school programs, to hospitals, to health institutions, and we're really excited about the work that we're doing. And again, at the center of our strategy, thinking about how we coordinate all these services together. Just last week, Mayor de Blasio announced a $52 million program where the Department of Education will be awarding four-year grants to build 40 new community schools in New York City. This is the first of many initiatives we're going to be building, both to increase the resources that are available for the launch of community schools, but to begin to get the city working differently so that those institutions in the room working in New York City have a true partner in government in how you weave these institutions and resources together in schools and in neighborhoods. And we're looking forward to continuing that work over the summer, continuing to announce new initiatives over the summer. They continue to announce the launch of new community school initiatives over the summer. And the last thing I will talk about is the New York City Children's Cabinet. The Children's Cabinet came out of New York City's experience with the death of a 4-year-old boy, Miles Dobson. Miles's father was incarcerated. His father had custody. And Miles was known to the Administration of Children's Services as the child welfare system. But ACS did not know that Miles' dad was incarcerated. So when ACS would come, the child protective workers would come visit the home. They'd be told dad was at work. Had no reason to think otherwise. Until the dad's girlfriend, who was watching Miles, essentially tortured him and killed him. I know a part of the theme of today is around data. And I can't think of a more powerful statement about the power of data, where perhaps, and again, we don't know what would have happened, but one could imagine, what if that child protective worker had access to a very specific small piece of data that already existed in city government, that Miles's dad was under the supervision of the Department of Corrections. So at the Children's Cabinet, again, we're trying to think about how we can coordinate services among children and families differently. And this is truly, for me, the ultimate collective impact strategy. We start by thinking about data integration analysis. We have 23 city agencies that are currently participating in the Children's Cabinet. And we start by thinking about what is the data that exists in other parts of city government, where if you had access to that data, you could do your job more effectively. What would the Department of Education want from Child Protective Services? What would Child Protective Services want from the fire department? What would the fire department want from the Department of Probation? And really beginning to think about weaving that data together and making it accessible to decision makers in the field. So data as a tool for making better decisions, but also data as a tool for making policy decisions. As we think about all the information that exists in city government, how can we begin to think differently about how using that data can help drive policy decisions? Now, we've all seen the maps where if you layer the places where adults are going to prison, the communities where people are hungry, and the communities where crime is, and the communities where reading scores are low. We all know these are the same communities. But how we can begin to think about data as a predictive tool to understand which families need support, as a policymaking tool for deciding how to coordinate resources more effectively. And we think the Children's Cabinet can be a place where that work lives. But moving forward, empowering that data, creating that data as a tool not just for the city agencies, but again in the spirit of collective impact, all the different partners in the city, the nonprofits, the arts institutions, the hospitals, all the different institutions that come into contact with children and families. What if, with respect for privacy concerns, with utter care, we began to empower all these institutions so that they had access to the information they need to do a better job for children and families. And I think when you think about collective impact, that becomes the necessary, not sufficient, but the necessary input before anything else that happens. Because until all the institutions that work with families in the South Bronx and East New York have access to data about how children or families are doing, everything else that we talk about is impossible unless you have the information to know who the children are, what they need, and then to understand if you're actually having the impact we're meant to have. So moving forward, we know we have a lot of work to do, and a lot of that work lives in the area of data. We have a lot of work to do to build systems of quality assurance. As we build these big systems, we build a pre-kindergarten system, how do we actually know that the system, with 73,000 children across sites all over the city, run by large institutions, run by public schools, but run by smaller agencies, how do we make sure that every child in those seats is having a quality experience, is having quality interactions with teachers? And how do we do that without waiting for 4 or 5 years before we start to see test scores? And a lot of the work that we're doing now, while at the same time we're trying to build the infrastructure for this program, is build our infrastructures to understand how we know that we're doing a good job, so that we know that the investments we're making are successful in doing the work they're supposed to do. It's a really exciting time in New York City. I think in a lot of ways it parallels what's happening around the state and bringing this work together. And I know that I feel very blessed to have my seat, to have my role where I can help think about how the city can be a partner for these collective impact initiatives moving forward here in New York. And I really want everyone here to know that you do have a partner in New York City City Hall as we figure out how to move this work forward. and help make the promise of equal opportunity real for every one of our children here in our city. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time. And I don't know if am I taking questions, or do I have time to take questions? Is that okay? But anyway, thank you very much. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it.
Were there any questions for the Deputy Mayor? This is your chance.
Not about the World Cup though. Again, I wouldn't.
Hi, that was a great presentation. Thank you very much. My name is Teresa Pardo. I'm from the University at Albany Orena Center that focuses on data and how we can employ the use of data. Oh, thanks. Employ the use of data, or help governments and their partners employ the use of data in exactly the kinds of ways you're talking about. So my question really has to do with the work that I'm doing when I put on the hat of advisor to Governor Cuomo on the Open New York. And my question is really to the extent that you've found the open data initiatives both at the city level, which are wonderful, and at the state level, which are increasingly wonderful. Are those efforts and those growing communities focused on opening up more government data are you finding them useful to your efforts?
Absolutely. So we're really building on, in a lot of ways, initiatives that already exist, both in the private sector and in the public sector. One of the big victories in the Bloomberg administration was an initiative called Hhs Connect, which was led by Deputy Mayor Linda Gibbs and others, where we began in really powerful ways to connect data among different agencies, the Human Resource Administration and others, so that workers in the field would have access to a more compelling set of information as they're making decisions about clients. And Miles Dobson case is an example. You can spin off the many examples in which that kind of data sharing is powerful. So just an example, what we're doing right now is we're not reinventing the wheel. We're starting from an initiative like Hhs Connect and thinking about how do we take that to the next level. And so much of that starts with leadership and having a mayor who wants to start by answering every question yes, as opposed to answering every question no. And so I do think there is tremendous opportunity there. There's another initiative in city government called CIDI, which is again looking at how do you use data to make better predictions and to inform policy, make better predictions about where services are needed, where services need to go, where you need to build schools, where you need to deploy resources. And all of this work, we're partnering with private industry, we're partnering with technology, we're partnering with open source initiatives, open data initiatives. And so the answer is yes. We have a tremendous amount of work to do, but what we really do have now, which is so exciting, is we have all the actors at the table who want to get this done. So when the Children Cabinet meets, those are 23 commissioners meeting, from the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, et cetera, the health commissioner, the chancellor, et cetera. So that we start by saying, what do we want to do? And so that when folks leave that room and when staff and lawyers, and I say this with love as a lawyer, but when staff and lawyers try to figure out what we can actually accomplish, what's actually legal, we start with the leaders saying, this is what we want to accomplish, and we move forward from there. And then again, I think the next phase, and again, this is complicated and challenging for reasons that we all understand, the next phase, I think, for me becomes how do you open up this data beyond government actors, and how do you open up this data to the community school director, the health clinic? Because ultimately, if you're really serious about thinking about impact comprehensively, the information can't only exist among government actors. It has to be shared and has to empower all the different folks who we're engaging in improving the lives of children.
So we're actually out of time. So we have one question. Fantastic question. Thank you, Teresa. Again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.